Hello and welcome back to Dreamhack Denver, the Magic the Gathering Regional Championship. Mason, we just watched round 13. We're going into round 14 now. We're going to take a look at the standings here in just a second. What do you think of the tournament so far?
It's been very exciting. I'm very interested to see sort of how everything develops. And as we're looking at our standings here, we're seeing Mac interest on that Domain Rhinos, who was our first feature match of the day. One of the sole undefeateds. Looks to be making our top eight, going to be shaking hands. Congratulations to Mac. We're going to see probably more of him later in the day. And we've got a lot of names on this screen that you probably know and have seen over the course of time here. We have Max Kaminowski, which we're seeing our feature match area in just a second. Judy Keith, we've seen all weekend. Samuel Pardilla, Platinum Pro from back in the day, and so many more on this screen. It's just an awesome event with great players coming out and showing their stuff.
Right, and something that I'm really interested in is, we saw yesterday in the metagame breakdown how Rhinos was the number one deck, Yogg was the number two deck, but looking at this here, it looks like the Yogg conversion rate, at least into this top 16, kind of beat out the Rhinos ones.
Yeah, we're still one round to go. A lot can happen. But one of the things we also saw with the conversion rate is that Yawgmoth, while having a much smaller representation yesterday, actually converted much better than Rhinos did, with so much of the field being their quote unquote worst matchup of Rhinos. So a really strong sign that Yawgmoth is still sort of one of the players to beat. And I think a lot of times when players talk about Rhinos, they sort of say Rhinos and Yogg are two of the best decks. And Rhinos is just one of the better decks against Yogg, right? So you're kind of choosing like 1A or 1B, and this one's good against the other one. So I kind of want to play that deck while still having a really powerful and proactive strategy.
Right, and for round 14, we are going to be first seeing Min win on Temur Rhinos against Max Kaminowski on Izzet Murktide. It looks like we are taking a look at Max's list right now.
I mean, Max is one of the people when it comes to Murktide. If you follow Max on social media, if you see on Magic Online Results Twinless Twin, this is one of the best players when it comes to Murktide. I am not surprised in the slightest to see Max playing for our top eight. There's no one I would listen to more than Max when it comes to playing an Izzet Murktide list. I have no feedback. His list looks great. I'm very excited to see him battle it out because he knows this matchup is one he's going to have to beat this weekend, and he won't come in with no plans for it.
I am excited as well. We're going to take a look now at Min wins list on Temur Rhinos. And, like we were saying, one of our top decks. What are your thoughts here?
I think Temur Rhinos is a really good, solid deck. Traditionally, pretty good in this matchup if the Murktide players aren't prepared. Even when they are, still sort of a slight favorite. And I think we're going to see a really exciting battle. And I just want to get into it.
Yeah, I do too. And I think we are ready to get into it right now. We're going to get into our round 14 match here with Max Kaminowski on the left and Min Win on the right. And we've got our players' hands locked and loaded, ready to go. I think we're about ready to start this game.
It's going to be a doozy. Looks like Max has like a Ragavan in his opening hand, which is one of the better things he can be looking for. And Min has a Surveil land, which what I've learned from Twitch chat is basically ancestral. So, both players have strong starts at the start of this one.
Yeah, very strong starts indeed, as we're going to see Max fetch and likely shock, yes, shock, to play something, possibly what we believe to be a Ragavan.
Yeah, and I said it at the start of this match, Max is one of the people you go to from Murktide. So if you're looking for Murktide thoughts, opinions, stuff like this, he's putting out a lot of great content on that sort of thing and has just done very well with the deck consistently. And in an open decklist event like this, decks like Murktide get a little bit of extra benefit because they know the kind of cards they can and can't keep, right? Max might have a hand in the, a normal round that has like, a DRC and a bunch of bolts and be like, oh, I can maybe keep this. Not here. He knows he needs the right mixture of cards, and this open deckless environment is going to allow him to do it.
Right, and for Max, turn one Ragavan, the Boomer's opinion of the best opening turn in Modern. But for Min, turn one Surveil land, Zoomer's opinion of the best opening turn in Modern. Powerful starts.
Yeah. And, we talked about the Surveil lands this weekend, sort of drawing a card when you put something in the graveyard. I feel like Ragavan just countered a spell. We hit this boom bust. It was going to kill the Ragavan. Now it's gone. I feel like we just got to really widen our range of what we were talking about when we talk about Magic. Surveil lands draw cards, Ragavan counters cards, more news at 11.
So Ragavan is going to get in, make a treasure token. DRC is going to come down for Max. And then there's going to be a bobble with a DRC trigger. He's taking a look at his own deck, surveilling off the DRC, discarding a Ledger Shredder, and playing a land. Looks like we're going to get an island out, just a basic island. Of course, we have the treasure token. So a lot of options available for Max.
Yeah, I'm curious what Max's plans are with the bobble. Normally, you might see someone look at their top card and then decide if they want to fetch, but it looks like Max knew he wanted to preordain no matter what. So maybe he plans to save this bobble for a later time.
Sure, and he is going to go ahead and preordain, surveilling away a land as he tops one card and bottom. Oh, thinking about it.
Just a moment of double checking.
11 and 2 at the RZ. Good time to make sure. And it looks like we've got a Brazen Borrower and a Murktide in hand. And he's looking at a Preordain, which he's putting on top, and a land, which he's putting on bottom. And he's going to go ahead and draw that Preordain. And Bobble taking a look at the top of Min's deck. He's going to pass. He's going to get his draw off the Bobble trigger. Quite the start from Max. I mean, really getting to do a lot. Just take a ton of game actions.
Yeah, and this is what you need to do against the Rhino deck. Early, they don't do very much, right? They surveil. They say, I drew a card. They go copium. I've interacted in the early turns. But Max here actually getting in, early quick spells. His cards are strong and impactful, and his power spikes really things like Murktide, which are going to come down, sometimes very soon if you have draws like this. And that is some of your best ways to beat the Rhinos, because on turn 3, they're going to start presenting a really big clock against you with these 4/4s that can be very hard to answer if you're not set up correctly. So Max having a start like this, if you're a Max fan, is what you need to see.
Right, and going to exile a Force Negation off the top of Min's deck with the Ragavan trigger. Min already down to 13 life before he even gets to his third turn. Just very explosive. Max has 5 mana available to him. And it just feels like he is in such control of this game as he casts a Preordain, surveils off the top of his deck, just puts a Lightning Bolt in the graveyard. And we know he's got that Murktide that he can drop whenever he needs to.
Yeah, and I really like the way Max has been playing so far. Really crisp, but also making sure to take the time. I think Max knows he's having a good start. And he's like, this is not the opportunity to waste this good start. I'm playing for the Pro Tour. I'm playing for the top 8. I'm playing at a chance to play at Worlds. I need to just double check and make sure that I'm playing at a good competitive place, which Max is, but also, make sure we don't waste this opportunity.
Right, and we are going to cast this Murktide, choosing what to exile here. I think that's going to be 3 counters on the Murktide, making sure he still has Delirium with the 4 remaining cards in his deck, showing his opponent.
Yeah, looks like we are responding to the Murktide on the stack now that we have delved and sort of everyone knows how big it's going to be.
Right, and that's going to be another Surveil land for Min Win. He's going to get a look. Is going to bin a Gemstone Caverns. And the Murktide seems to be resolving with 2 counters on it.
Yeah, Max choosing maybe to play into a card like Flame of Anor a bit more, but in exchange gets to keep the Delirium on his DRC. And it knows that Min is only playing 2 Flame of Anors in the main deck this weekend. So sort of a calculated risk, but one that kind of, doesn't put too many eggs in one basket. Also seeing like a Subtlety had come down, then we might have been in real trouble at keeping the pressure on.
Sure, now 3rd land coming down for Min, which, as we all know, is a very important number for Rhinos, as he's going to outburst at the beginning of Max's turn and begin cascading. And just a few cards off the top, we're going to hit Rhinos. And we will see if that resolves. Just showing his opponent the cards.
It's pretty small, but it does matter. Now we know, like, hey, if we need to play into a Tidebinder Mage.
And a Spell Pierce to counter the Footfalls. It's going to get a Surveil trigger off the DRC bin, a Bauble. Looks like Min might be responding to the Spell Pierce with a Force of Negation, pitching a Tidebinder.
I think Max has a counter spell in hand. Might just be a situation of do these Rhinos actually matter? Because Max is attacking in the air for 8. That puts Min down to 4.
It looks like he is going to counter the Force of Negation. These players fighting hard over this Crashing Footfalls. As Max takes his Surveil trigger.
Yeah, and Max does have a Brazen Borrower still left over at the end of all this. And because we decided to fight over the Rhinos, now our Ragavan is going to get in as well. Meaning we're going to put Min on, I think, about no outs at this point, just falling down to 2 life. There's just too many things that get in the way. We have too many treasure tokens. And obviously Max kept the card on top as well. Suddenly Bolt's a real draw when normally it isn't. It's a tough spot to be.
Min is just going to scoop up to that. What a dominant display from Max. And, just as you said, he is clearly the Murktide expert. What do you think about how game 1 went down, Mason?
I think Max did the thing he needed to do. He needed to win game 1. That's the spot where he was kind of down. Won the dice roll. Very important. Min, though, obviously someone who clearly knows Rhinos as well. You're not going to make it to 11-2 at the RC without playing this matchup some and having some good understanding. So I think it's going to be a real slugfest. I think Max winning that game is so important because post-board, he's going to have more cards that matter, and he's going to lose a lot of his cards that aren't as effective. So if you're a Max fan, a huge win, but this game is far from over. Rhinos can easily win game 2 and 3. It is still favored them.
Right, and we're going to go into game 2 right now and see these two very powerful players. I mean, just getting to this point of the RC is an incredible feat. And we're going to see Min start us off with a land go, and Max once again getting his turn 1 Ragavan. What a start. It looks like Min's just going to fetch at the end of turn here.
Yeah, a little hard to see, but it feels like both players are down a card, so there might have been some mulligans involved. Obviously, I haven't got a good look at their hand, but they just both seem a little light on cards.
Right, which, if that's the case, having a Ragavan on board, pretty nice. Getting to make some treasures, getting to look at some cards. And once again, we have turn 1 Ragavan versus turn 1 Surveil land. But this time, Ragavan not going to get to counter the Surveil off the top.
True. This is really a moment where play draw does matter a lot. We talked about this a little bit yesterday on how some of the matchups play draw can be really compounded on, like the Rhino as mirror, for example. But in this matchup, the fact that we kind of have to expose our Ragavan for a turn, if we get to on top of this, we're in a really good spot, but opens up lines like this, and it's really hard for Max to commit to dashing the Ragavan if he doesn't have things like Spell Pierce or Force Negation to kind of make sure that the Ragavan dies. He still is covered from the Rhinos.
Right, a dead going to easily deal with the Ragavan. As we go back over to Max, it's going to shock in a Steam Vents. Sorry, Fetch Shock. And we're going to see just what he's looking to play here. And does have a fetch land. Could potentially have something to respond with, but as you said last game, this Rhinos deck doesn't typically have a lot to say early on.
Yeah, post board, a lot of Rhinos players will play cards like Mystical Dispute, and Min is playing 3 of those. So that's something that Max needs to be a little bit more aware of. But, it is something that Max is going to have to battle throughout the course of the game. And this is kind of a big sign that, yeah, Max doesn't have anything to really stop the Rhinos, where he's choosing to actually, stop them from hitting the battlefield. So he's just going to deploy a bunch to the board and make Min have to answer these threats. And hopefully Min won't have, turn 3, turn 4 Rhinos.
Right. And I'm not 100% sure, but I think I saw a counterspell in Max's hand.
Yeah, so he has Counterspell, Expressive Iteration, and Murktide. And I talked about how maybe he doesn't have something to actually stop the Rhinos. And I think the EE is really moving the needle on that, where normally you might want to hold up the Counterspell, even though it might kind of strangle your mana for a little while, in the hopes of just, making sure the Rhinos don't hit. Max can let those Rhinos hit the battlefield. And if you draw something like a land, pop the EE, attack with the Ragavan, get the treasure, play the land, and have the Counterspell up for the next one. And really, he's playing to win right now, which I love. He is trying to be like, hey, I'm not going to win the game if it goes super long. I got to get creatures on the battlefield. I have to apply pressure. I can't let this Rhinos player go on forever. And that might mean some Rhinos hit the board, but hopefully this Engineered Explosives can clean it up.
Right, and we're going to see a island cycle from Min, where he's going to get to shock in this breeding pool. Has Rhino's mana now. I think a good chance we're going to see some cascading take place. He's going to tap out for an outburst on his turn. And just 2 from the top is our Crashing Footfalls, which is going to resolve. He's going to get the 2 Rhino tokens.
Looks like Min maybe has some pictures of his friends with altered to be Rhinos, which is pretty funny. I'll call a spade a spade.
It's very good. The players seem to be enjoying it. Back on Max's turn now, we are going to play the explosives, get the Surveil trigger off the DRC, bin a counter spell, and get rid of those Rhinos, and simultaneously Min's friends, and swing out with his creatures. Which is, of course, going to give us a Ragavan trigger, a Crashing Footfalls off the top with a treasure token.
I am extremely... Okay, I was very curious if Max would suspend this Footfalls because, I don't think he has something like a Spell Pierce in hand, but if he suspended that Footfalls, would have Rhinos in a couple turns. So if he isn't able to stop the next Rhinos, might be able to, double block, set up a situation where we can actually win via our own Footfalls, but decides to hold the mana up / keep the treasure for a later turn. Makes sense,
Sure.
though.
And we're going to see Min play a Murktide here. Not sure how many counters it is coming in with. We'll see in just a second. 4 counter Murktide as we go back over to Max. That is going to be a big blocker for him to have to deal with.
You saw Max rub it a little. He knows his DRC is going straight into the mouth of that Murktide if he does not find an answer to it.
Yeah, and we see Max really thinking hard about this turn, knows it's an important one.
Max doesn't want us to know what he has, though. Keeps it close to the chest in every sense of the word.
Right, very secretive. Cards are his business, not ours. Looks like we've got a Murktide, a counterspell, and surely other cards. Maybe a
there's another
Ragavan?
Ragavan in hand, which I think Max is really hoping that Min might be like, hey, let's just hit this Ragavan right now. Eat it up. I can eat that DRC whenever.
Mm-hmm. We'll see. He has swung out. We'll see how Min decides to block.
Notable, Min had Dead Gone and Endurance in hand. Endurance is a great one for eating DRCs in the future, turning off on Unholy Heats, which could be one of the ways that we might try to combine Unholy Heat with some other damage-based thing to kill a Murktide. But also, it's a good way to stop Max from getting a Murktide down.
Well, it looks like Min is thinking he might be blocking the Ragavan here with his Murktide.
I just want to give a quick shout out. You can see all of Max's friends in the background. This is what's so cool about the Pro Tour win-in moments. I'm watching Max's friends come up and try to see over the railing. And I'm assuming some of Min's friends too, because I'm seeing some people I don't quite know. I know Max a little bit personally. And it's very awesome to see everyone so excited. Everyone knows this is such a high stake, big moment for both of these players. And you can see it on their face.
Yeah, very exciting to be in this moment, having all your friends watching your match. I mean, it's high stakes, but also, you know, they're here because they love to play Magic at competitive levels, and they're getting to do it at one of the most competitive levels you can do it. We're going to see another dead on a Ragavan. 3 Ragavans in Max's graveyard now. As Min goes down to actually all tied up on life, 8 all after swinging out with the Murktide. It's going to be a preordained from Matt, a Surveil trigger off of the DRC. Thinking very hard about this Surveil.
I'm wondering really what card gets us in that spot. I'm going to be very excited to see what it is there.
It's like leaving 1 on top, drawing it with the preordain. Looks like a subtlety in hand now with 2 counterspells and a Murktide. A lot of answers in hand for Max. As an endurance comes down for Min.
This is brutal. Not only is it going to potentially eat the DRC if we don't stop it now, it will also make it so we can't play the Murktide in our hand. Basically, you know, Max is in a forced position to fight over this endurance one way or another.
Right, and it is a tough position to be in for Max. He's thinking hard about how to respond to this endurance.
And this is what we talked a little bit about, right? Like this matchup is still favored Min. Max winning game 1 is huge because he has so many cards that don't line up well in his main deck against the Rhinos deck. So that was a big one for him to win. But, you know, post board, Min has 4 endurance, 3 mystical disputes. Those are cards that really matter in this matchup for reasons that we're seeing here, where, you know, Max can sometimes get stuck on mana, doesn't have time to fully develop, can't play around mystical disputes. A lot of our creatures play into endurance. Endurance also kind of works as a weird counterspell for some of our cards. So Min in a position here of really doing a good job of just playing the cards that matter and not even needing a ton of Rhinos. We only had 1 Cascade spell, and we're just playing good, clean Temur Magic from there.
Right, and it looks like we are going to evoke the subtlety, pitching a counterspell. And that is resolving. Min is putting the endurance back on top of the deck. Subtlety into the graveyard from the evoke. As Min goes down to 5. And Max goes ahead and plays a Murktide of his own. Looks like with 2 counters. Also going to turn off Delirium.
Yeah, a tough spot for Max there. His Murktide is not big enough to eat the other Murktide, but luckily is lethal. You know, if Min can't block it now, we know there's an endurance on top of Min's deck here. And I gotta say, I love Max's patience earlier in the game, not using the treasure, and I love this too. Min attacks, and Max is like, no block. Oh, excuse me. Immediately was started to be like no block and deciding maybe if he wants to block or not. I kind of like the no block here from Max. You've got counterspell in hand. If Min gets cute with the endurance, you can maybe, you know, counterspell this and get out of it. If he has Violent Outburst, you're probably in a bit of trouble anyways.
Sure, and it looks like is going to block, is going to lose the Murktide, trying to preserve his health here.
Yeah, that's a really hard spot. I don't know if I cannot judge either way on that play because you do lose the outburst, but also this endurance, you know, is going to be able to chump block the Murktide. And if you just, you know, let your opponent, the main phase player on counterspell, then, you know, you're not having lethal. So a tough spot to be.
It looks like he's going to pick up a DRC, scoop to Min, go to game 3. Oh, that was some high level intense Magic, Mason. What do you think of how this match is shaping post board?
It's playing out kind of like I thought it would. Max has some more cards that are actually kind of effective in the matchup. We have things like Engineered Explosive to fight over the Rhinos, but Min has some high impact sideboard cards too that we get to play for this matchup and others with Mystical Disputes and Endurances. And we saw just how powerful those Endurances were in that game, and also how it maybe made Max play a little differently, knowing Mystical Dispute was in the deck. I'm very excited to see this game 3. Let's just get right to it. Enough of us. Let's get more Magic.
Absolutely. And let's see how that play draw affects our match as we have Max on the play once more, looking at a pretty incredible opening hand here.
Well, I've been told by the world the Surveil lands draw you a card, and Max, if had an untapped land, they would have had the perfect hand, but it was the Surveil land. And the Surveil lands are very powerful. They're definitely something that add a lot to the deck. I love that Max is up to 19 lands. We saw in our last round, our player had 18. Max cut a spell to play the land. I think that is the way you want to do it. I don't think you want to be cutting shock lands for these Surveil lands. You want to be kind of half a spell, half a land as the idea. But unfortunately for Max there, even though that hand was great, it was just too slow because you didn't do anything in the first turn, despite having so many of the cards. So insane discipline there by Max. I love that mulligan, even if it looks like he's maybe throwing away a somewhat perfect hand.
Right. And, we expect very disciplined plays from any player we see get to this level. I mean, just being here is impressive. We're going to see Max take a mulligan, look at a fresh grip of cards here. And we've got better land choices. Looks like he is going to stick with this. Not going to have a turn 1 Ragavan this time, though. And looks like we're just going to preordain and take a quick look here.
Yeah, it looks like Max is hoping that preordain and expressive iteration can help find our threats later, and that counter's supposed to be good enough, and basically just choosing to guarantee have some resources over taking a mulligan and trying to basically bank the perfect combination of land, Ragavan, cheap interaction. That's kind of all you would really want from a 5-card hand. So just hoping the cantrips get there, and that's what cards like preordain do.
Sure, and we're gonna go back over to Max, who's just gonna play a tapped land and say go. As Min fetches, possibly for another one of those Surveil lands.
Yeah, this is key where the Surveil lands are good. Game 1 and 2, we saw Max have a Ragavan on 1, and we got the Surveil land, and when we were on the play, it was more okay because we're able to untap and answer the Ragavan before it gets going. But these Surveil lands, you do cost you against these 1 and 2 mana cards in the early game. But with Max not having one here, actually means that Min gets to kind of surveil and have a lot more peace of mind about it. We're not falling behind. We're not having to worry about getting chip shotted by something.
Yeah, Min's gonna go ahead and get over to his turn 2, where he's going to play another fetch and just pass it right on back to Max. Then he is going to fetch. Looks like in the upkeep, might be seeing a land get tapped down here.
Yep. This is a classic Rhino play of just ice your opponent's land to their upkeep. We see Max not have any pressure, right? And so Min might be hoping to prevent him from using cantrips to sculpt. Or, if Max is stuck on lands, we know Max has some. But if he was stuck, he might not be able to counterspell in the next turn. So Min's just trying to make Max work with less information and sort of put him in an awkward spot before he starts jamming threats. Didn't get a good look at Min's hand, but I did see an Endurance. And an Endurance could be a really good one here for getting out of it.
Sure, and it looks like the land is going to get tapped. And then we do see a Ragavan off the top here, which he is going to go ahead and play for turn. Looks like also a Spell Pierce in hand for Max.
Yeah, and he has that 1 mana answer to the Rhinos card. So I'm going to be curious to see how Min wants to play this, because we seem to have a flush hand of interaction in our non-cascade cards. But also having 2 Violent Outbursts. So Min can kind of play the game how he wants, and looks to be fighting over the Ragavan.
All right, looks like going to dead the Ragavan once more. So we go back over to Max, who's going to play an Expressive Iteration. And Min is deciding if that's resolving or not. It looks like it is. Max takes a look at a few cards here.
I really like that play from Min. I mean, we know the Ragavan probably wasn't there the turn before, meaning it was the draw, meaning it's Max's most likely his only threat that isn't a Murktide regent. You know, Murktide might be stuck in our hand, right? Takes a little bit to come down. So by Min fighting over it, he might strangle Max's mana for a couple turns, making him fight over the Rhinos and letting him slowly develop and use things like Endurance to maybe pinch Max.
Right, and it looks like we are looking at a subtlety of the hand. This looks like he's debating between a subtlety and a Ragavan here.
Yeah, this is a really tough one because subtlety is really good against the cards like Tishana's Tidebinder we've talked about a little, the Endurance I keep bringing up, those kind of cards. Or Ragavan is probably the stronger card against Rhinos typically here.
Sure, it looks like he is going to go for the Ragavan. Looks like there's a little bit of a judge clarification happening on this land.
Yeah, last turn we played Preordained, we played Ragavan, we had a mana up. So, but it is always good to double check. You know, that's what we're all here for. And we saw yesterday some of our players get confused, judges get confused. Turns out judges are just players who aren't playing. It happens.
Absolutely. Looks like we're going to see that Ragavan come down for Max. He's going to hope that this one sticks as Min fetches at end of turn down to 15 life.
Been really impressed with Min's play here. Been very stoic, not really phased by anything, you know, has had some pretty bad breaks at parts of this game, had some really good ones, haven't been able to really get a vibe off anything from him when it comes to that, and seems to be playing good tight Magic and just really thinking about not only what he needs to do, but what Max is trying to do and how he can play around those cards. So signs of a high-level experienced player here, doing what he does best, putting 4/4s in play.
And I just want to reiterate to everyone, these are win and ends, right? Like this is a high stakes match of Magic, and you can kind of tell with the crowd that just seems to keep growing larger throughout this match. We're seeing a lot of really strong cards in Min's hand here. We see the Outburst, we see the Tidebinder. That might be an Endurance as well.
Yeah, I think we have Endurance, Double Outburst, Tidebinder, and some blue card I can't quite make out. I love this from Min. This Endurance is so good. Max clearly has a Spell Pierce or a Flusterstorm or something along those lines. I'm not going to play into the mana you're wasting right now. I'm just going to develop this Endurance, not let you get a Murktide down, not let you do any unholy heat shenanigans, or just use an actual counterspell in this Endurance. You're going to have to fight through this card if you want that Ragavan to do anything.
Right, putting Max in a very tough spot here as he casts another Expressive Iteration to hopefully find some answers off the top of his deck. But that's going to get Mystical disputed by Min, and Max is going to decide if he wants to fight over this or not.
It's a really interesting spot because Max doesn't really have the tools to do much now, but if we counterspell here in some way, it looks like we are going to go for the Fluster. We now open ourselves up to maybe get through this Endurance this turn if we have a good Expressive Iteration, but Rhinos might come down, but Max does have an Engineered Explosive, so a tough spot there for sure.
It looks like we might have hit 3 lands off of that EI.
If that's the case, that's pretty... Okay, it
looks like think one was a DRC. Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. I thought it was 3 lands too for a second. I was like, yeah, that's pretty unfortunate. But, you know, on the other hand, if we had 3 lands on top, probably we're going to lose the game anyways. So just work through them and keep moving on. Love this no fetch by Max here. No reason to open yourself up to a Violent Outburst or anything like that. You've got the counterspell covered. I know it seems small, but those are the things that make or break tournaments.
And we're going to see Max go ahead and play that DRC. And a Mishra's Bauble, which doesn't give the Surveil trigger from the DRC. Of course, we know Min has a Tidebinder, could respond to any of these triggers. It's going to bin a Ragavan. I think so. We're pretty close to Delirium, right?
Oh, yeah. Bauble puts us at Delirium, but Delirium means that we have to attack into the Endurance. So it's a little bit of a, well, we are going to be delirious.
It looks like Violent Outburst has been cast.
This is actually, I know this sounds weird, kind of lucky and good for Max the way this cascade is going. He just saw a lot of cards that he's probably trying to play around get flipped over. I saw a couple subtleties, some more endurances, some dead gons. And while there's still more copies of those potentially, in hand for Max's opponent here, Min, but he now knows, okay, I can play the odds a little bit better until, a fetch happens. And so having that bigger cascade gives him a lot of information.
Yeah, it looks like Crashing Footfalls on the stack. We'll see if this is going to resolve or not as Min shuffles the revealed cards.
One of my favorite moments in Magic is my opponent cascaded and flipped over the 7 other cascaders in their deck. And I was no longer worried about cascades coming down. Max, not quite that lucky today.
Not quite, but is thinking about responding to this Rhinos. Looks like it's going to bobble first before anything happens. Take a look at the top of his deck, get a little bit of information.
Very clean play there. Want to make sure, like, hey, do I have something on top of my deck that can answer these Rhinos? Because we saw last game, we were able to handle the Rhinos a bit better post board. Things like Murktide sticking down are also huge problems, and Max doesn't have an answer if Min is slow rolling, a Murktide in hand. All we have is this one counterspell, and we do have things like Engineered Explosives in hand that can answer those Rhinos. We just have to get it on board. So I love that Max is like, hey, I really need to know what's going on in this spot here. I'm going to pop this bauble now. It might mean my DRC is going to die to this endurance, but I just need the information.
Right, and it looks like the Footfalls is going to resolve. We're going to get Min's friends with the horns back. And Max is going to go ahead and crack that fetch.
Didn't like what we saw, but we get another look with Surveil here.
That's right. Going to take another look here.
And, at the beginning of the game, we talked about the Surveil land really put us in an awkward spot, right? If that had been any sort of fetch or whatever, we would have been very happy. But here now in the mid game, this is where the Surveil lands are really strong, right? Early turns with Rhinos, super nice. You're not doing much. That's great. In the mid-late game, when every draw step matters and you need to have the right spells for the right spot, making sure that you sort of set yourself up for success is so important. And he liked what he saw and left it on top.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting how these Surveil lands are powerful for different decks at different times. I think that really goes to show sort of the versatility of them.
Yeah, I do want to make it clear for people at home, there are only 2 Rhinos in play. I know it's a little bit confusing with our, we kind of have these tokens of his friends underneath there. So it's only being an attack here for an 11. Just wanted to highlight that really quick because myself had a moment of like, wait, is he just dead?
Yeah, just the 2 Rhinos, unfortunately, for Min. It looks like there's going to be a double block on one of them, or maybe a double block on the Endurance.
I love the double block on the Endurance. We have the Engineered Explosives. If we're going to win this game, it probably involves killing these Rhinos.
Right, and it looks like Violent Outburst from Min. So now we know that Min still has a Tidebinder in hand.
Yeah, and that Tidebinder will be able to stop the Engineered Explosives from popping. This is actually, though, really good for Max if he can get the EE to pop. Min's committing a lot right now. It does sort of, be unoptimal that now that Endurance is going to eat both creatures. Before, thanks to Delirium, it was only going to eat either the DRC or the Ragavan, making the double block a lot better. Which, you saw Mac kind of shake his head at. It happens. But now Min's really pushing right now. He's like, hey, I have the lead. Let me extend the lead here. So if Max can get this EE on the ground, he is going to probably be in a really stable position, barring anything like Murktide or more Footfalls coming off the top.
Absolutely. So we're going to see, this Outburst also going to just push a little bit more damage to Max as we see more of Min's friends come down. Now we have 4 Rhinos on the board, only 2 attacking. So that will be 10 damage to Max's life total. All the creatures are going to trade. We're going to see Max go down to 9 to Min's 15. Then we're going to go back over to Max.
Yeah, and we see. Oh, Max drew another counterspell, Niall.
Yeah, having those is going to be huge when this fight over this trigger occurs.
Min's going to want to save his friends and his rhinos from this engineered explosives, but it's going to be a hard-fought battle.
And it looks like Max is thinking very carefully about how to proceed here. He knows that this is a critical moment of this game and therefore of this match.
I think we're also trying to figure out if we want to play our Murktide first, potentially.
He's just going to say go.
Yeah, I think what Max is thinking is, okay, the only cards that matter are Tidebinders. My opponent has, 6 mana, meaning we can only Tidebinder twice, which means they can't go Tidebinder, Mystical Dispute, or something like that. So I kind of have it covered, which might stop something from happening. And if it doesn't stop something from happening, it might tie up Min's mana on his turn instead of my own.
Sure, we are going to activate the engineered explosives after attackers have been declared. Min is going to cast Tidebinder.
You see Max kind of raise an eyebrow like, oh, maybe Max forgot about that one for a half second / didn't think that was the out that Min had.
Right, and he's going to cast Counterspell, Mystical Dispute coming down on the Counterspell. Max is essentially forced to try again on countering the Tidebinder, and it is going to be successful. Engineered Explosive is going to go off. All the rhinos are gone.
Yeah, and that was the punish for Max doing that, is that he maybe had to fight over with 2 counterspells. If we had done it on our turn, we would only have needed 1. But we do have this Murktide Regent, so Max is going to have a big Murktide.
Looks like 3 counters on that Murktide.
4.
That is a big Murktide.
Yeah, you can't help but think that Min can get out of this, though, because his Murktide, I'm pretty sure, will also be at least that big, if not bigger. So both players were kind of reaching the end game now. Lots of good draw steps for them here.
We are going to see another Cascader from Min. It's going to hit Footfalls almost immediately off the top of the deck. Max is letting this resolve. The rhinos are coming down. And looks like on Max's turn, we're just going to preordain here real quick. Take a look. Bottom both these cards. Not what he's looking for. He's just going to pass.
I mean, Max is dead on board if Min animates the Mutavault and has, Max has nothing. So
Max does have a couple cards in hand. Looks like 2 exactly, which Min is confirming right now. Looks like he's getting out of basic. Has something he wants to play here. Is that a Flame of Anor?
Yeah, it looks like we're drawn 2. I think that's a good sign that maybe Max has something like Subtlety to be the blocker. Because I would imagine maybe a card like Unholy Heat would come down before the Flame cards draw. I'm not a Murktide expert, but that would be my gut reaction.
Looks like Mutavault is being activated. Swinging out to Max, who's going to extend the handshake. Min is our winner for this round 14 match.
Congratulations, Min. Incredibly well played match there from both players. It's going to be interesting to see sort of how Max feels about that. I know he makes a lot of content, reviews a lot of his own matches. I'm going to be very excited to see if he reviews this one and see what he has to say. But both players did really well. And I think Max still very much live for a Pro Tour invite. Our top 32 do get a Pro Tour invite. It kind of depends on how his breakers break out. But either way, a great weekend from both those players. And I'm excited to see Min play it out in the top 8.
Yeah, well, Max played incredibly well. Both players played incredibly well. I mean, we are really seeing the level of skill and expertise it takes to get to this point of the regional championships. We are going to have another match here in a second. First, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back with more Magic. Welcome back to the Dreamhack Denver Regional Championships. We are still in round 14 here. We are about to see a pretty exciting match of two different 4-color decks. We've got Jacob Kozak on one side with a 4-color Omnath deck and Jay Wojciechowski on a 4-color control deck. Mason, what do you think of these two 4-color decks? I know that you are a big-time 4-color player.
Yeah, Jay here, playing a bunch of Supreme Verdicts in the main deck, cards like Ren and 6, kind of a classic ode to my heart back when Yorion was the thing. And I think this deck is really good. You need to play really well. We've seen Jay do that so far this weekend. We put ourselves in a position for the top 8 to then win our chance to play Worlds, get this Pro Tour invite. I think this deck is really strong and, really well positioned on the weekend. I do wonder how well positioned it's going to be in sort of the pseudo mirror, because some of your cards don't line up as well in this mirror match. But to be fair, the same thing's going to happen for Jacob.
Yeah, we're going to take a look at Jacob's list real quick here. Now, what do you think are some of the key differences? I know you said that it's a pseudo mirror, but does anything stick out to you?
Yeah, Jacob has Chalice of the Void in the main deck. A great call for this weekend. Super good against Rhinos on the Cascade stuff. You can put X's 1 in your deck as well, and your deck still works. Very smart move there from Jacob, who we saw LCQ in. Be one of our 9-0 players yesterday and is now playing for that top 8 matchup. That is something that is kind of not super great in this matchup, but Cosmic Rebirth is something that can be super important in the matchup and let us have more copies of our important cards if the matchup ends up going that way. Because, like we saw with Jay, Supreme Verdict is something we don't have access to that might make it so our Omnaths are pressured more. So having another pseudo copy with Cosmic Rebirth could be something that comes up a lot here. Not to mention their sideboards are fairly different, given they are the 4-color decks. But we're going to have to see exactly how it plays out. And I'm ready just to watch some magic.
I'm ready to. Let's get into this game. We've got Jay on the left here and Jacob on the right with our 4-color control decks. It looks like they are ready to begin as well. Looks like we might have Jay on the play here if the players have resolved mulligans. 2 One Rings in the hand for Jay. Looks like a Teferi. Lorgan revealed. And it looks like Jacob is actually the one on the play here, going Triumph Pass. And Triumph Pass right back from Jay.
So this matchup, a couple things matter more than anything else. The first thing that matters is making your land drops, because both players are going to be flushed on cards. And cards and mana are all that really matters. Killing each other is something that's sort of a last priority. These players have very similar ways to actually win the game, and you just want to be the person who ends up positioning yourself to get there and stop your opponent from doing it. So you want to fight over things like their One Rings. Their Omnath can be a really important card because it gives life that mitigates the cost of the One Ring and gives mana in these huge bursts that allow you to sort of start snowballing. Now, like we talked about, Jay has Supreme Verdict, so Jacob is in a bit of an awkward position in that regard, where, he might be trying to commit early with an Omnath and try and make a big board presence, and Jay has the get out of jail free card.
Sure, it looks like we are going back to Jay here, who's playing a 3rd land. Am I mistaken, or did Jacob miss a land drop?
No, Jacob missed a land there. Looks like we kept a 2-lander and had a Boseiju as sort of a legendary situation and just didn't have the mana to cycle things like Fire Ice. Looks like we were maybe hoping on Reprieve actually getting something from Jay. And I think Jay also does have a 4th land now.
Yeah, very interesting in this match where we have, just said how important these land drops are. As Jay discards to hand size, gets rid of a Teferi, and Jacob discards to hand size, gets rid of a Teferi. Ends up actually, looks like Jay attempted to cast a spell there.
Oh, excuse me. Both players have Cosmic Rebirth. I missed that on the other player's deck list here. So Cosmic Rebirth is something that would gotten back, that Teferi and put it in play.
Sure, and it looks like that is what is happening here. So we're going to have Teferi tick down. Jay's going to draw a card and discard a One Ring to hand size. And just brutal for Jacob, having to discard Omnath after Omnath. We're just not having the lands here. As Jay does manage to make a 4th land drop. And these players are just hemorrhaging cards to hand size right now.
Yeah, Jacob really needs to draw the first fetch land, because the first fetch land, we have a Wrenn 6 in hand. If we can get it down, we're going to be in a pretty good position. Luckily, Chalice of the Void, not a card that's super important in this matchup. So, discarding it, not what we want to be doing, but not the end of the world.
And a One Ring coming down for Jay. He's going to immediately draw a card and make a 5th land drop. And Jacob's going to say, all right, that's enough. Let's try again. Maybe this time I'll get lands.
Honestly, I totally get it. I've played a lot of 4-color, more than the average person at least. And I can tell you that sometimes you have to keep hands like that. And also, if you're beating like that, these games are long and interactive. I said we're going to go back and forth. We're going to have a bunch of cards. So conceding there, if it's like, listen, I'm not going to draw another land here. I'm just going to die. The One Ring's going to get out of control. I know my opponent's a fair play. I can't resolve my spells. It's better to pick it up and try and win game 2 and 3. You took kind of high risk, high reward hand. It didn't pay off. That's magic. Let's get down to game 2 and see if we can get a real battle going.
Absolutely. We're going to get right into game 2 here. Jacob hoping he's going to have a little bit better of a mana situation as he draws an opening 7. It looks like it has a couple lands at its disposal. Looks like he's going to be willing to keep that.
Notably, Jay has Wrenn 6 and fetch land and the ability to play Wrenn 6. Last game, we kind of kept a hand with the ability to draw into a fetch, and Jacob has a ton of fetches in his deck, so it's a very reasonable bet to make. This game, we actually have it here, and on the play, Jay's only going to have cards like Force Negation and Subtlety to stop this, which, in the case of Subtlety, Jacob's not even that frustrated by it. It's like, whatever, I'll play it next turn, pick up my land, that's cool. And Force Negation, it's like, well, not great here, but whatever. And if we try and fight over with things like Leyline Binding, Arbor Sages are going to get it back, and we're going to get Arbor Sage back with the Wrenn 6. So a very, great spot to be in here if you're a Jacob fan, like Jacob's father is, so I know is watching the stream. He's in a good spot. I don't know if you play Magic or not. Your son's in a good position. There you go. I'll check back in a couple of minutes, Jacob Dad.
Yeah, we'll keep Jacob's dad posted on his progress. He is going to shock in a land here and play the Wrenn 6. Tick up, get a fetch land back. And Jacob is off to the races in a way that he just was not able to get to in game 1. It's looking very good for him as Jay gets a Triome and goes to his turn 2.
Wrenn 6 is just, it's hard to say just how important it is to have a Wrenn 6 going, because it makes all your land drops, which we talked about mana being so important, but it's also a way to win the game. If we don't have a prismatic ending like that, it might just end up where we just have all prismatic endings for the rest of the game, and all of our lands are turning into real spells. So that was a spot where Jay needed to have an answer in that turn or two there, and luckily for him, had it.
That's right. And we saw in Jacob's hand there a couple Leyline Bindings, some good answers for if Jay decides to play anything. Jay is just going to buy his companion to hand, and Jacob's going to fetch out a land here on the instep, shuffle up very quickly.
Yeah, these players know this game can go long. We saw Jacob concede what was early by a traditional sense, very reasonable in the 4-color sense. And we see him trying to make land drops here. Looks like we were really banking on the Wrenn 6 to get there. Luckily, it did bridge us 1 turn, but all we've done so far is lose the play, right? We can still be able to develop and do really well from this position, but we're in a spot where we just need to hit a land in the next turn or so. Losing 1 turn is not the end of the world in these games that go really long now. If the game goes long, then it's okay that you kind of lost 1 turn. If we start losing multiple turns and our opponent's doing stuff like the One Ring, that's where things get out of hand.
Sure, and we are going to see Jay play an Omnath on turn 4. Pretty important card in these decks.
I also love that Jay's slamming it. We see a lot of people sometimes hold it for turn 5 with the fetch. Jay knows this is a matchup where we're going to be slamming cards back and forth, answering each other. And if Jacob doesn't have something here, or maybe has to do something like Evoke, that could be a great way for Jay to sort of get a little bit of an edge. Or if it doesn't go answered, we're going to have 9 mana next turn.
Yeah, definitely very powerful. Now, Jacob, not short on answers here. Kind of just deciding how he wants to approach this, what he wants to let Jay do. He knows he needs to approach this very carefully, down a game in a very important match of Magic for him. Looks like he is going to evoke the subtlety, pitching an Omnath.
Yeah, that Teferi's been ticked up already.
Looks like there might be a little confusion about it, and they are just making sure they agree.
Yep.
He's going to pass over to Jay. Looks like he's going to Island Cycle here. And we see that Solitude in hand. Getting out to a 5th mana. Pretty nice. I mean, as you were just saying, making these land drops, casting the spells. You know, Jay feels like he's in a pretty good position.
And worth noting, Jay is in a good position and has a high impact sideboard card in hand. We have Narset Parter Avails. That card will not allow our opponent to draw extra cards in the turn, which means if we can stick and protect it, the One Ring will not be an out for Jacob.
So it looks like he's going to go ahead and cast his companion, play a Surveil land.
I love this companion play here. Just have it pressure the Teferi, able to Prismatic Ending thanks to the Teferi uptick, but basically force Jacob to fight over a card he doesn't really want to fight over. Like, Kahira doesn't matter all that much in the mirror match. So, while your Prismatic Ending, sometimes, you end up with a couple extra, you do need to kind of put your opponent in a position so they can't have those extra. So, heads up play there by Jay.
And looks like we're going to see the tick up on the Teferi here. As Jacob does find the 4th land with a Shocked Steam Vents, plays a One Ring, draws a card, and this is really going to help accelerate him.
Yeah, it looks like Jay has Omnath and Prismatic Ending. Looks like we're going to take a little bit of a high risk play here and play this Omnath, hope to hit a fetch land, and then Prismatic Ending the One Ring. But Jacob won't allow it.
As the Solitude comes down, looks like he pitched a Binding for it.
Yeah, and that might seem like a lot there. And, in the short term, it really is. But getting this One Ring going and being the person to have it is so important. And, Jay is now going to have to still fight over this One Ring. And, we're down some Omnaths.
Yeah, we're going to go back over to Jay here, who has no shortage of choices in his hand for what he wants to be doing. Looks like he's going to be looking to... Hold on, Jacob's counting mana here.
I think Jacob might be thinking, is it possible for you to actually get the 4th color easily to fight over my One Ring? And if that's the case, maybe I should be doing something not like this.
Yeah, very, very interested to see. Okay, a Teferi of Jay's own coming down. Looks like we are going to see Jacob fetch in response here.
Yeah, and I think we're going to be seeing probably something like Subtlety here.
And you are correct, as the Subtlety comes down, and that Teferi is going to go on the bottom of the deck. Now, Mason, give us an update for Jacob's dad. How should he be feeling?
Should be pretty happy for your son, but not out of the woods yet. We're getting things going. That One Ring card just draws so many things and gets Jacob going. It is as powerful as those Lord of the Rings movies told you about, and we just need to keep protecting it and keep drawing cards and using our resources. Jacob does have a card to fight over it, and Jay has done a good job of using Jacob's resources to kind of whittle through those to then maybe stick the Narset Parter Avails to stop it. But Jacob finally has some pressure on board and can maybe start closing this game out. The biggest thing here is Jacob's just stuck on mana, and we talked about that before. We need to hit our land drops pretty consistently if we're going to use all the resources that these other things give us. So this Ren 6 here is a huge pickup. Getting a land every turn is going to be massive.
Yeah, Renin 6, very important here. You know, was a big part of Jacob's plan in the early game, got dealt with swiftly, but now it's back and it's going to be helping him once again. So we're going to go back over to Jay, untapping with 6 lands. And we see ley lines, we see endings, we see rings. We see a lot of choices for Jay here. Interested to see which one he decides to go with. Looks like it's going to be an ending on the Teferi. And Jacob is going to Dovin's veto that. And Jay is going to say, joke's on you, I've got another answer for Teferi. We'll see if this one resolves or not. So Jacob is thinking very carefully about this one. He's going to leyline the leyline in response. And then we're going to see a dress down.
Yeah, Jay here taking a really controlling approach to things with 4 counter spells in his deck. Those are a lot more powerful than Reprieve is in the matchup, if we can get to a point where we can actually cast them, which is why I see Jay kind of fighting over this Teferi. We need to be able to actually cast our counter spells. The Reprieves just buy time, and move through your deck a bit. Better against decks like Rhinos because it's easier on the mana and things like that. But here, if Jay can, answer this Teferi, we're going to have actual hard answers, and Jay will just have more of them. And honestly, might be able to deck Jacob because Jacob has moved through so many more cards. The problem is he has to fight through all those cards.
Right, and we did see a second ring for Jacob, which he can throw down at any point that he wants. If this ring damage starts to become a little too much, he's going to play the Omnath. Draw a card off of it, play a land, gain some life. He's doing the Omnath things.
Yeah, and you see in Jay's hand, we have that Supreme Verdict. So at least one stayed in post-board. Remember, we did already play game 1 here. So Jacob's going to get an additional 4 mana this turn. If he plays more creatures to the board, then they're going to get caught up in the Supreme Verdict, which is almost assuredly going to come down soon here.
Right, and it looks like we are upticking the Teferi, attacking with subtlety. And Jacob just starting to whittle Jay down here. Looks like he might be discarding the hand sides at the end of turn.
Yep, that's why you saw Jacob tick up the rim but not actually do anything, because he knew he was going to have to move to hand size, trying to play quickly to make sure we finish all 3 games. These players do need a match win to make our top 8, so we want to make sure that we're doing that. So good use of time there for Jacob.
All right, and we're going to see Jay play a ring of his own. While it's on the stack, Jacob's going to go ahead and draw with his ring. See if he can find an answer. He's thinking very hard about this one.
Does Jacob have some... we're Cosmic Rebirthing.
Looks like we're going to get some lands onto field here. And we're going to exile that 1 ring for Jay.
Yeah, that was a very sick use of Cosmic Rebirth to bring back the fetch land on Jay's turn, get the 4 life, get the fetch, get the extra mana, and then use that mana to cast Prismatic Ending, thanks to Teferi's uptick.
Right, really taking full advantage of all of the text on Omnath there. And clearly these players really know what they're doing with these 4-color decks. So we're going to see Jacob play his companion. And it looked like he attacked, but I believe Jay still has protection from the ring. Maybe thought better of attacking.
Yeah, Kahira gives vigilance, so Jacob gets the run that do you remember your ring trigger or not. Um, I kind of wish Jacob would pick up his subtlety. Maybe he has one in hand with his Teferi minus, but just to fight over Jay's potential threats. And
It's like,
Reprieve,
yeah, Reprieve's going to end the game there with the Supreme Verdict. That is going to be a game win for Jacob. We're going to go into a game 3. That was a wild back and forth battle, Mason. What do you think these players are hoping to see in game 3?
yeah, I mean, we talked a second ago about how Counterspell is probably better than Reprieve on average because Reprieve buys time. Notably, Reprieve doesn't counter. It puts the Supreme Verdict back in the hand, so the can't be counter clause doesn't matter there. So a moment where that decision came up huge in deck building is getting rewarded as we go into game number 3 here. The noticeable thing, we got stuck on mana. We didn't get to do the things. We fell behind. The early turns matter so much. We need to be developing. Let's jump down to game number 3 and see if both players can develop early and play quickly here to see who will be in our top 8 today.
Yeah, our final game of round 14 here. We're going to see who it goes to with Jay on the play. And it looks like Jacob taking a mulligan to 6. And it's just going to be try on pass from Jay.
Yeah, it's okay to take mulligans and these sort of 4-color matchups, especially if you're finding stuff like, Wrenn and 6 plus fetch lands. Like, you just want to make all of your land drops like we saw those games and have a little bit of interaction, or to stop them from developing the board, or have your own to develop. It's okay if you're down a card. You draw so many cards with the One Ring. You draw so many cards from just your miscellaneous things that have, draw a card attached to them, like Reprieve, like Omnath. So it's going to be interesting to see how this goes here, but nothing to worry about with him being down a card there. And Jay looking pretty confident here, has got a counterspell lined up.
Yeah, looking very confident indeed as we approach his 3rd turn and he plays the Triumph. Just content to hold up his mana. Let Jacob take his turn. Jacob going to ice one of Jay's lands.
I love this play. He knows Jay has actual counterspell in his deck. Looks like he kind of set that up last turn, right? Played the Odawara as the 4-color controlling deck there, and now we're setting up to maybe slam something like Teferi Time Raveler here, which will turn off the counterspell for the rest of the game and just work through our deck a little bit like we talked about, trying to make those land drops.
All right, and we are going to see Jacob's turn now. This looks like he's going to play a Wrenn and 6 for turn, which is really going to smooth out these land drops as he's going to get a fetch from the yard and pass it back over to Jay. It's going to be a swift end for the Wrenn and 6.
Yeah, Wrenn is super important. So I love that Jay's fighting over here, and a lot of strength there for Jacob. I think Jacob has the good read that Jay has a counterspell in hand, just the way he's been playing, tapping his mana. Makes a lot of sense that he has counterspell. So I like that Jacob is not only holding his fetches to try and make more land drops, but isn't playing into counterspell. And the fact that Jay, is missing land drops is a huge sign that something's up there when it comes to spells.
Yeah, definitely very disciplined, very tight play from both of our players here. Really showing why either one of them could deserve to be in our top 8 after this game, is we're going to fetch a Triumph for Jacob.
Yeah, and I think something I want to hit on right there is like, the difference between top 8 and not here is one match, right? Like both these players had incredible performances before we even get to, that sort of part of the whole conversation. They should be proud either way, and are both, very live still for a Pertra invite, depending on how breakers go. It does look like Jay's unfortunately not finding lands, which has been the story of the match.
Yeah, definitely tough spot. We keep, hammering home how important these land drops are. And, Jacob started on the draw, but is now ahead on lands. It's very important for this match. Great news if you are Jacob's dad.
Yep. And I think one thing to keep in mind too is that, we see Jay has a Wrenn 6 in hand, but since he hasn't drawn one of his, 12 fetch lands in his deck, he hasn't been able to really use the Wrenn 6. So Jay kept kind of, the ability to eventually get there, but hasn't been able to.
Looks like he's going to resolve a Solitude, develop his board a little bit before going into his next turn. We do see a subtlety coming down for Jay. He is also going to develop a bit, hit his 5th land drop, which will maybe open up some options for him.
Yeah, we can actually develop the Renin 6 now if we want to. It could get attack down or prismatic ending. We probably need to, actually have to pick up a land. But before, we couldn't do that without lowering the counterspell shield, which Jay just seems to be refusing to do.
Sure, and Jacob going to trade elementals with Jay here. He's going to fetch for his 6th land, staying ahead of Jay on land drops.
I think Jacob has Dovin's Veto in hand as well. So when Jacob starts a counter war, he is going to be able to back up his spells. We do see that happen.
Right, so the One Ring comes down. 6 mana feels like such an important number for these decks, as it enables them to play their 4 mana spells and keep up their counter spell mana. We're going to see a Leyline come down on that ring. He'll draw in response, keeping up that 2 mana.
I love that from Jacob. He knows that Jay has some big card, probably like a One Ring, and he has Dovin's Veto, so he wants to keep that option open and knows that he can use stuff like Boseiju to answer this Leyline binding later in the game if he needs to.
Right, and we are going to see the Dovin's Veto on the One Ring. Such tight discipline play from Jacob. Many players would be tempted to counter the Leyline there. But he is in it for the long haul.
Now, what Jacob doesn't know is Jay's hand is basically just more copies of the One Ring followed by more copies of the One Ring, but he's done a great job putting himself in a position to fight over these.
And he is going to play a One Ring, get it countered immediately.
I gotta say, it's somehow Jay still hasn't drawn a fetch land. So this Renin 6 I think we've had in hand since turn 2 is just rotting away.
Yeah, as he goes to play another One Ring, this one is going to resolve. He's going to get the protection trigger. He's going to draw off of it.
I like this play a lot from Jay. You saw him just go for the ring immediately, and we saw Jacob not do it before because Jacob was in a good position and could afford to be like, hey, you're going to have to binding. You're clearly holding up counter spells. You don't have enough land drops. Jay's like, I need to make my land drops and I need to keep going here. So I'm just going to activate this right away. And if you have binding, you have binding.
Yeah, very smart play here as he fetches a Surveil land and is thinking quite hard about what to do with this card on the top of the deck. It is a Supreme Verdict that he's going to send to the graveyard. He's going to play the Renin 6 and tick it up to get back the one fetch land he's been able to find this game. And we're going to see a Boseiju on the binding at the end of turn there, which is going to let Jacob draw another card.
Yeah, and you see Jacob kind of ask Jay there, may I? And Jay's like, I'm figuring out if I have my planes or not, if I want to shock, because if we had something like a planes, we could maybe threaten a Leyline binding of our own to get it back again, but just decides to grab a shock land.
Yeah, we're going to go back over to Jacob now. Has a ring in play. Has a lot of mana available to him. But Jay's position on the board just looking better and better. So he's going to start off by drawing a couple cards off his ring.
And we had an awkward game mana-wise early, but we're seeing not able to capitalize off that. It means that now we're getting into the One Ring slugfest that we've seen before. As Jay has actually pulled up on mana thanks to things like the Renin 6 and the Boseiju.
That's right, and it's putting Jacob in a little bit of an awkward spot. He's counting out Jay's lands, thinking very hard. I mean, I know you play a lot of 4-color decks. The land sequencing seems like it has to really be a headache sometimes.
It's a headache when things aren't coming together, and if you're kind of like got a normal draw that's functioning, it's so easy. But both players sort of aren't having those perfect normal draws. We have like Forest and Boseiju in the land base right now for Jacob, so that we could go and fight with that One Ring and start that earlier. Meaning we have double green, which puts us in a weird spot for our counter magic.
Sure, and it looks like Omnath coming down, fetching, doing a lot for Jacob here. Let's see what he's able to do off of it.
This might be a situation where maybe we'll see Jacob, just try to pick up like a hero or something. I'll be interested to see. We maybe see something like a prismatic ending on the One Ring.
Thinking very hard about his opponent's lands, what's available. We see the Solitude, the Reprieve, as he's going to shock in a Temple Garden, I believe. And it looks like we are going to ending the ring there and say go.
Yeah, Jacob has the One Ring going, which is really strong. Jay has both Cryptic Cloak and the One Ring. Cryptic Cloak, a new card from Murders, which if we are able to just like exchange resources the whole time and end up with, no one has One Rings left, that Cryptic Cloak's going to take over the game.
Sure, and we're going to see Jacob reprieve the One Ring, but of course Jay, no shortage of mana, is just going to recast it, and it's going to get Leyline Binding by Jacob now that Jay is tapped out.
Yeah, Jay is, I think, almost finally out of gas. We have that Cryptic Coat that we talked about. If you haven't got to look at all the new Murder at Karlov Manor cards yet, basically it is 3 mana, and then true name had going for it. But then you can return the cloak to your hand, and that's the thing about it. It keeps coming back and back and back, and leaving 2/2s behind. So very Pack Rat-esque as well in the design with Cryptic Cloak, and a very strong card if the game is about cards. We just need to get to that point, and Jay's doing a good job of engineering that situation.
Yeah, it definitely seems like a great way to spend the surplus of mana that our players wind up with at the later stages of the game. As we're seeing Jacob, so he's attacked Renin 6 with his Omnath, taking it down to 1 loyalty. He's making his land drops, getting his Omnath triggers. It's like he's all the way up to 19 life to Jay's 13, and is playing a Teferi. Very important card. Looks like he has another one in hand even. And he's going to tick up that Teferi and pass with so much mana available to him. Looks like Jay thinking about playing his own Omnath here. And Jacob tapping for something.
Looks like a Solitude, maybe?
Here's 5 mana tapped. It will be a Solitude, exiling the Omnath. And now Jay will get to draw his card off of it.
The advantage bar no more. Jacob's dad's update instead. We're doing okay. We're doing okay. We're in a precarious position, though.
Precarious indeed, as Jay is going to exile something or think twice about it.
I really also want to appreciate both players have been playing very quickly in this matchup. It's, a matchup where there's a lot of decisions, so you might want to stop and slow down, but you want to both give each other a chance to, win it all out, and playing at a competitive pace is important. So huge props to both these players for doing that, even with so many decisions happening.
Absolutely. And I mean, you can really tell that both of these players know how to play these decks quickly. I mean, if you look at both their records, it's 11-2. There aren't draws there. They haven't been drawing any of their matches. They are winning. They're ending their matches. We're definitely seeing that here.
I mean, Jacob has this One Ring going.
Yeah, and he is going to get rid of that Rin and 6 once and for all with the Solitude. It's like a decent number of lands in hand, but a Subtlety, some other cards in there.
I wonder if Jacob was thinking about maybe bouncing his own Solitude to hand to prevent it from getting solituded, and/or having more options as thing goes on. Is apparently we need the mana, so we're shocking. That's got to be scary for Jay.
There's going to be a Teferi of his own for Jay being put on the stack, as it looks like a Subtlety is going to come down on that. And we're going to see Teferi go to the bottom of the deck once more. And there's that Cryptic Cloak we were just talking about. Jacob's going to take a minute to read it. This is a new card. Always want to double check that you fully understand what the card does, as Jay is going to cloak the top of his deck.
Yep. So for those at home, that's a 2/2 with Ward 2. I'll be curious to see if production has the tokens ready to go. Looks like they're grabbing it. Let's go. But that's what's going to be happening. And the cloak is giving +1/+0 and unblockable. So.
Right. And Jacob just getting to draw so many cards here off this ring. Looking at his lands, looking at the graveyard. I think I saw another ring in hand for him.
Yeah, Cryptic Cloak is a card that's really good in this kind of matchup if we're both on like no resources, or it's like your first One Ring and you kind of get the game about that. Right now, not quite as good as the One Ring when it comes to fighting over cards. It is a 3/2, and we're going to be able to block.
Sure, and it looks like Jacob is clarifying some of the text on Cryptic Cloak here, making sure he understands it fully.
Yeah, the way he was putting his hands up there, I think he maybe thought the card said it can't block or be blocked. And, instead that's not how it was. Not the end of the world, though.
Is going to trade away the Solitude, but the Subtlety damage will go through. As he plays a Rin and 6. Ticks up to grab a Boseiju. And it's like Jay is going to, in response, return his Cryptic Cloak, keep it safe. That card is so hard to deal with once it hits the board. And we're going to see a One Ring draw for Jay. That could potentially be huge if he's able to resolve it, which he's going to attempt to do now. And it looks like it is going to resolve. However, it is going to get exiled upon activation.
Yeah, and that is sort of the problem here, right? Once you're the one who's starting to, like Jacob didn't even draw his 5 cards last turn. You know what I mean? It's just kind of hanging out over there. Once you start kind of getting that part of the game going, it becomes really hard to catch up unless you have some cards that can answer stuff right away. So Cryptic Cloak, not nothing. It's going to move through our deck a little bit, but it is, really not what's about. And you see Jacob just not even activating his One Ring. knows that he has the tools he needs to close the game out.
Yeah, plenty of land at his disposal. Quite the board setup. As he plays an Omnath, draws a card, starts doing the whole Omnath thing, fetching a land out, buying his companion, and playing it, which is going to beef up that subtlety.
Do you think Jacob's going to do the Cosmic Rebirth, buy back the land, pow, 4 damage with Omnath? Just Boros charm him. It's a bit of
Possibly.
a...
Now, looks like Jay did lose life there, but didn't he have a ring protection?
So the ring protection, you have to remember when the time comes. You don't have to announce it, but also you can miss it. It's one of those awkward things that kind of comes up with how the cards template and everything and how triggers work. So it looks like Jay did miss his ring trigger. Unfortunate.
Yeah, I mean, these are complicated board states at high pressure. It looks like maybe they just remembered it and his life total's going back up.
That might be on us with production there. We maybe jumped the gun a little bit. We try to stay on top of it with life total, so we might have just marked off a little early. RB.
Sure, and looks like we are activating the Rin in 6.
I wonder if Jacob can start Bosejuing down Jay's lands.
Sure, and then just retrieving the Boseiju with the Rin in 6. Oh, goes to ping Jay, remembers once again the ring protection.
Yeah, Jacob learning in real time why Cryptic Cloak is a card you definitely want to be thinking about for all of the formats right now. It is very hard to kill here. If he goes to Boseiju it, Jay can pick it back up again, and that 2/2 is going to stay around. It is not tied to the cloak.
Yeah. And he is going to pass the turn here. And an Omnath pickup for Jay could be pretty huge.
Yeah, and now that we're in turns, Jay needs to do everything that he can to try to win this game as quickly as he can. Jacob obviously is the one who really has the onus to win the game. He is, the furthest ahead. But Jay also obviously wants to make our top 8, wants to get the Pro Tour invite. So we're going to have to see how he's going to try and maneuver to actually get this win as we're in turn 1 of turns.
Right, and it looks like in response to this Omnath, Jacob has drawn 5 or 6 cards off the ring and is going to exile the Omnath. Jay will still get to draw his card.
Yeah, it looks like... And Jay just has to kind of develop everything because the Teferi's in the way. We can't play anything on Jacob's turn. We just kind of have to tap out and do what we can.
Sure, it looks like that's going to be a Solitude or an attempted Solitude, which is going to resolve, exile the Subtlety.
Weird spot.
Very weird spot to be in.
I have to imagine Jacob has the tools in hand to clear the way and push. The question is, can he push and present lethal before Jay can, stabilize and maybe get a draw and try and lock up his Pro Tour invite for sure, and maybe, a bit more cash with a higher standing. I'll say this, Jacob does have Cosmic Rebirth. That's going to let us get back a land, which could maybe do the 4 damage with the Omnath thing. So really it comes down to the question of what's our removal look like?
Sure, it looks like we're thinking about playing an ice here, or maybe a fire. Looks like it's going to be fire on the Solitude. Jacob's counting his lands, making sure things are going to work how he's expecting it. Down ticking the Rin 6, thinking better of it.
Yeah, I think he might have a winning line here where he can unsummon with Teferi, and as long as that isn't a Solitude underneath there, and Jay doesn't have a white card, he'll pay the 2 on the ward, attack for 8, put Jay to 2, minus Rin, put Jay to 1, play another Rin from hand, kill Jay. I believe that is the line Jacob is thinking about. It's hard to know because he has so many cards in hand, but he also, I think, has access to the rest of his deck, basically, with the One Ring if he activates it, which it's really just a matter of, okay, I literally have 50 options in front of me. I just got to make sure I don't mess them up here. Now that we're in untimed rounds, I can take a little bit longer to make sure I do it all correctly, especially with this new card and this new mechanic that just came out this weekend.
Yeah, definitely very, very intense spot to be in if you're Jacob. To be in turns at the feature match, round 14 of the RC, so many choices at your disposal. All you need to do is execute them in the right sequence.
All right. It looks like so. I'm unsure if Jacob has any more fetchables in deck. So I think that's maybe what the count was. We're trying to see if we can actually, get our +4 mana from Omnath and also get closer to that trigger. Looks like we're going to take our 6 cards there.
Yeah, just so many choices for Jacob here. So many cards drawn.
Okay. I think we did it.
Yeah, so that's going to be a Leyline Binding on the cloaked creature.
Which uncloaks it because of how Morphin things work, which is very weird. But now it's a Ren 6, so we killed the Leyline Binding. We do get a Ren 6.
Sure, and Jacob counting lands here. So he's going to downtick the Teferi.
I mean, here's the thing. I don't know if Jacob can actually kill this turn. But I think Jacob has so many tools that we should be fine. Looks like we're just double checking something about how much damage should have happened with the Omnath and the Kahira. Looks like maybe the players accidentally marked down the life totals a little wrong. Happens, especially in this sort of situation.
Absolutely. Very intense moment of this game.
You see Jay start to untap and Jacob goes, no, I got to discard. Man, it's going to be a minute. I got 20 actual cards in hand. Give me a sec. But as I was saying there, I think Jacob just is in a weird spot where he might not have the win this turn. And this next turn will be the last turn that Jacob can attack. But he has so many cards like Subtlety and Solitude and things like that I think he can probably bridge the turn with Jay only having 1 turn. And while Jay is going to get a lot of things in play thanks to the Cryptic Cloak, it is not going to be that big of a deal thanks to cards like Teferi, Time Raveler, and our side.
Sure, and we are going to see Jay bouncing the cloak, replaying it, just trying to make as many bodies as he can.
Yeah, Jay pretty clearly trying to, stay alive here. But I think Jacob has... There we go.
Yep, Jay's going to extend the handshake. Jacob Kojak's going to be our round 14 winner. You can see how relieved he looks. Congratulations to Jacob and to Jacob's dad. What a great day.
Yeah, it's an exciting moment. That's so awesome. You have 3 more matches of Magic to go, Jacob and Jacob's dad. We have a shot at Worlds. Let's keep it up. Let's keep going. And great play to both players. And it was awesome to see. And, hopefully get to see more of these players at future events.
Yeah, this has been some very exciting Magic out of this regional championships. Now we're going to do a quick giveaway from the sponsors of this broadcast, Heavy Play.
Yeah, Heavy Play has been sponsoring our coverage this weekend, helping bring that to you all. Thank you so much to Heavy Play, and they want to get back to you all even more. So if you type Heavy Play in the chat, you have a chance to win $5 in store credit and pick up some of their awesome products. And while you're there, use that code Denver2024 to get 10% off that. So it's like they're giving you even more money. Thank you so much to Heavy Play for helping bring this broadcast to everyone's homes this weekend.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Heavy Play. It has been just a joy to watch these matches and to commentate them with you, Mason. We've got some more Magic coming. We're going to pass it off to the rest of our broadcast team, but definitely stay tuned if you want to see how the rest of this RC shakes out.